For thousands of years, humanity appeared weak, a species that stumbled through history, plagued by infighting and limited ambition. To the galactic civilizations watching from the shadows, Earth was insignificant, its people simple and unremarkable, or so they thought. But beneath humanity's apparent mediocrity, something was brewing, something the galaxy would regret underestimating. Long before humanity looked to the stars, they were already under scrutiny. The Zenith Collective, a coalition of ancient alien civilizations spanning the galaxy, made it their mission to monitor developing species, determining which would rise to prominence and which would fall into irrelevance. From their perspective, Earth was a backwater planet inhabited by a chaotic, volatile species. Humans were no more than a footnote in galactic history. The observation began in earnest during humanity's first experiments with fire. Primitive and unremarkable, the creatures appeared to fumble through their existence with little understanding of their surroundings. For the collective, this was routine. Dozens of species across the galaxy followed similar trajectories, only to stagnate before becoming a meaningful presence. The Zenith Collective's probes remained hidden in Earth's atmosphere, carefully cataloging humanity's progress. Every action, from their wars to their innovations, was studied and stored. Centuries passed and humanity advanced, but their development was uneven. The collective noted the invention of agriculture, the rise of great empires, and the occasional flashes of brilliance in science and philosophy. Yet for every step forward, there seemed to be 2 steps back. Wars consumed entire regions, technological progress stalled for generations, and resources were squandered in petty conflicts. Humanity's lack of coordination made them an unlikely candidate for galactic relevance. The Zenith Collective nicknamed them the Sleepwalkers, a species with no direction, doomed to wander aimlessly until they faded into obscurity. While other developing civilizations were conquering their home systems or creating utopias, humans seemed fixated on short-term survival. To the collective, this proved their insignificance. They lacked the foresight and unity required to become a galactic power. When humanity entered the Industrial Revolution, the collective noticed an unusual spike in their technological progression. Machines transformed the way humans lived, but with innovation came destruction. Factories polluted their skies, weapons of unprecedented power were unleashed in wars, and entire populations suffered from the rapid changes in society. The collective dismissed this as another example of humanity's self-destructive tendencies. They had seen it before in countless other species that burned brightly but briefly, unable to balance progress with survival. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that humanity's potential became slightly harder to ignore. Their experiments with nuclear energy marked a turning point. For the first time, humans wielded weapons capable of annihilating their entire species. The collective viewed this as confirmation of their earlier assessment: humans were on the brink of self-destruction. But what puzzled the collective was humanity's resilience. Despite the threat of mutual annihilation, humans survived, even thriving in the face of Cold War tension and existential dread. The true shock came when humans began venturing into space. Their rockets were crude, barely capable of leaving their atmosphere, but the ambition behind them was undeniable. The Zenith Collective, still confident in their superiority, allowed this fledgling exploration to continue. Humanity, after all, was still far from a threat. The collective failed to realize they were witnessing not the peak of human ingenuity but merely its foundation. What they saw as chaotic fumbling was actually adaptation, the hallmark of a species preparing for a future no one, not even themselves, could fully predict. Hidden beneath humanity's apparent mediocrity was a species learning, growing, and quietly outsmarting their watchers. For millennia, humanity had been nothing more than a curiosity to the Zenith Collective. Their probes had seen everything from the rise of ancient civilizations to the cataclysmic wars that marked human history. To the collective, humans were predictable, a species limited by their primitive nature and seemingly incapable of reaching the heights of advanced galactic civilizations. So, when Earth launched its first interstellar ship, the collective's response was dismissive amusement. The vessel, named Pioneer Horizon by its creators, was slow and fragile, little more than an experimental craft powered by fusion engines and rudimentary shielding. To humanity, it was a marvel, a symbol of their leap beyond their planetary confines. To the collective, it was a child's toy, a laughable attempt to step into a galaxy far beyond their understanding. The Zenith Collective allowed the ship to continue its journey unimpeded, deeming it harmless. They even subtly intervened when it encountered hazards along the way, nudging an asteroid from its path and ensuring that cosmic radiation didn't overwhelm its primitive systems. The Pioneer horizon reached its destination, a barren moon orbiting Proxima Centauri, and began transmitting data back to Earth. For humans, it was a triumph, celebrated with awe and hope. They were no longer confined to their solar system. But for the collective, it was nothing to be concerned about. Other civilizations had taken similar first steps, only to falter when faced with the immense challenges of interstellar expansion. Humanity, they believed, would be no different. Over the next few decades, however, the collective began to notice subtle changes. Humanity wasn't content with the slow pace of progress. They rapidly improved their designs, learning from each failure and building on each success. Ships became faster, their engines more efficient, and their shielding capable of withstanding the harsh realities of space. Orbital platforms were constructed around Earth, serving as hubs for industry and exploration. Mining operations extended to the asteroid belt, and humans began harvesting the resources of their solar system with astonishing efficiency. The Zenith Collective still saw no threat. To them, humanity was merely playing with tools. Their achievements, while impressive for such a young species, were trivial in the grand scheme of the galaxy. What they failed to understand was humanity's unique capacity for relentless iteration. Every setback became a lesson, every challenge an opportunity. Humans were not merely advancing, they were accelerating, their progress compounding in ways that defied the collective's models. The first real sign of the collective's miscalculation came when humanity constructed a massive orbital ring around Earth. The structure, initially dismissed as an ambitious vanity project, turned out to be a key infrastructure for advanced research, energy generation, and ship construction. Suddenly, humans weren't just building ships, they were building fleets. And they weren't stopping there. The Zenith Collective began to grow uneasy, though they still clung to their belief in humanity's ultimate inferiority. They failed to recognize the depth of human determination, the ingenuity hidden beneath their chaotic exterior. What the collective had mistaken for harmless ambition was, in fact, the first ripple of a coming storm. Their decision to ignore humanity's progress, to treat them as insignificant, was their first mistake. It would not be their last. For centuries, humanity's growth had gone unnoticed by the greater galaxy, their achievements masked by their relative isolation. Even the Zenith Collective, with all its advanced technology and omnipresent observation, underestimated the quiet storm brewing on Earth. The fragile ships and slow expansion of humanity seemed insignificant against the backdrop of ancient, interstellar civilizations. But everything changed when the Drevak Swarm arrived. The Drevak were a species feared across the galaxy, a nomadic, hive-minded empire that thrived on conquest. For millennia they had scoured the stars, consuming resources, enslaving populations, and leaving nothing but barren worlds in their wake. Their biological and technological prowess made them nearly unstoppable. To the Drevak, Earth was simply another target, a resource-rich world ripe for harvesting. The invasion began without warning. Massive Drevak warships, each one a grotesque fusion of organic matter and advanced alloys, descended upon human colonies on the fringes of their expanding territory. The first settlements stood no chance. Outposts were annihilated within hours, their defenses overwhelmed by the swarm's sheer ferocity. Millions of lives were lost before Earth even understood what was happening. The Drevak's strategy was efficient and brutal. They didn't just attack, they sought to cripple humanity's ability to resist. Supply lines were severed, orbital stations destroyed, and entire fleets obliterated. The swarm's ground forces, relentless and innumerable, swept across human-controlled planets, leaving devastation in their wake. For the first time in centuries, humanity faced an existential threat that seemed insurmountable. The Zenith Collective watched the invasion unfold with cold detachment. To them, this was a test of humanity's resilience, a measure of whether this young species could survive the harsh realities of the galaxy. The collective believed the outcome was inevitable. Humans, with their limited technology and lack of interstellar allies, would fall. Perhaps a few remnants would endure, scattered across the stars, but Earth itself would be lost. But what the Drevak and the collective both failed to anticipate was the sheer adaptability of humanity. The initial shock of the invasion was devastating, but it galvanized the human race in a way few species could match. The petty divisions that had plagued them for centuries melted away in the face of a shared enemy. Nations that had once been rivals now united under a single banner, pooling their resources and knowledge to mount a desperate defense. Factories on Earth, Mars, and Luna pivoted overnight from civilian production to war manufacturing. Ships were repaired and refitted at a breakneck pace, equipped with experimental weapons and shields that had been considered years away from deployment. Scientists worked around the clock, analyzing fragments of Drevak technology salvaged from wrecked ships, reverse engineering them to create new tools of war. The Drevak's initial victories slowed as human resistance stiffened. While humanity's weapons were no match for the swarm's raw power, their ingenuity began to turn the tide. Small, agile fleets struck at the Drevak's supply lines, disrupting their advance. Improvised electromagnetic pulses disabled entire waves of their organic drones, leaving them vulnerable to human counterattacks. Humanity fought with a ferocity and creativity that neither the Drevak nor the Zenith Collective had anticipated. But what truly shocked the galaxy was humanity's refusal to surrender, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Every loss seemed to make them stronger, every setback a lesson. For the Drevak, this was unprecedented. For the Zenith Collective, it was unsettling. Humanity was not merely reacting to the invasion, they were evolving in real time, adapting faster than any species the Collective had ever encountered. The Drevak invasion, intended to be a swift and decisive campaign, became a war of attrition. Humanity, once considered insignificant and weak, proved to be a force the galaxy could no longer ignore. The arrival of the swarm was meant to signal humanity's end, but instead it awakened something far more dangerous, a species that would fight to its last breath to survive. The Drevak Swarm's assault on humanity was not merely an invasion, it was systematic annihilation. Their methods were cruel and efficient, designed not just to conquer but to break the will of their victims. They targeted humanity's infrastructure, rendering entire planets defenseless, and stripped the resources they needed to fuel their endless expansion. But their cruelty reached its apex when they began abducting human children. To the Drevak, children were seen as malleable assets, biological resources to be re-engineered into tools of war or servitude. Entire transport ships were filled with terrified captives, torn from their families, their futures stolen. It was a calculated tactic to shatter humanity's resolve. For many species, the Drevak's use of fear and psychological warfare had led to swift surrender, but for humanity, it did the opposite. When the news of the abductions reached Earth, the effect was immediate. The horrors of war had already pushed humanity to the brink, but this was different. This was not just a threat to survival. It was a threat to the future itself. The children represented hope, a reason to endure the hardship of war. Without them, humanity had nothing left to fight for. And so they fought harder than ever before. The human response was both relentless and deeply personal. Entire fleets were redirected to track and intercept Drevak vessels suspected of carrying captives, regardless of the strategic cost. Massive, daring operations were launched to infiltrate enemy-held territories, not to win battles but to save lives. The losses were staggering. Ships were sacrificed, soldiers were lost, and resources were stretched thin. But every time a single child was recovered, it was treated as a victory greater than any battle won. The turning point came when one of these rescue missions uncovered a trove of Drevak technology aboard a salvage vessel. Among the wreckage were devices that far surpassed anything humanity had ever encountered. Instead of being overwhelmed by their complexity, human engineers and scientists worked tirelessly to reverse engineer the stolen tech. Within weeks, humanity began integrating Drevak advancements into their own designs, adapting and improving them at an astonishing pace. Humanity's ingenuity transformed the war. Experimental weapons capable of disabling Drevak ships with precise energy pulses were deployed in record time. New shielding systems rendered entire fleets impervious to attacks that had once decimated them. AI programs, crafted with a ruthless efficiency, infiltrated and disrupted the Drevak's hive communication networks, causing chaos within their ranks. But it wasn't just the technology that changed. Human strategy evolved as well. Where the Drevak relied on overwhelming force and predictable patterns, humanity became unpredictable. Fleets vanished and reappeared in unexpected locations, striking with precision before disappearing again. The Drevak found themselves losing not just territory, but the psychological advantage they had wielded so effectively. The Zenith Collective, still watching from the shadows, was stunned. Humanity was not merely surviving, they were thriving in the face of annihilation. The abduction of their children, meant to shatter them, had done the opposite. It had awakened something primal, something unstoppable. The collective realized they had made a grave error in their centuries-long assessment of humanity. They had assumed that the species' chaotic nature was a weakness, but now it was clear that it was their greatest strength. Humanity's ability to adapt, to rally around a cause, and to turn suffering into innovation was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. As the Drevak began to falter, humanity pushed forward with even greater resolve. Entire planets were reclaimed, their skies cleared of enemy ships, and every rescued child became a symbol not just of hope, but of humanity's refusal to be broken. The abductions had crossed a line, one the Drevak would come to regret. Humanity, once fragmented and scattered, was now united with a singular purpose: to protect their future at any cost. For the first time in the galaxy's long history, the hunters had become the hunted. The Drevak Swarm, invincible for millennia, faced the full force of a species that had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The war between humanity and the Drevak Swarm had reached a critical tipping point. What had once been a one-sided slaughter now began to shift in humanity's favor, fueled by the primal need to protect their children and reclaim their stolen future. Humanity unleashed its full potential in ways that stunned even their own leaders. The Drevak, who had conquered countless worlds with ease, found themselves facing a force unlike any they had encountered before. The key to humanity's resurgence lay in their boundless adaptability and sheer ingenuity. Every battle, every loss, and every fragment of Drevak technology salvaged from the battlefield became a lesson. Human scientists worked day and night, reverse engineering advanced Drevak weaponry, propulsion systems, and bioorganic armor. But they didn't just copy it, they improved it, blending alien advancements with their own creative leaps. What had started as a desperate struggle for survival evolved into a technological revolution. One of humanity's crowning achievements during this period was the Leviathan Initiative. Massive warships, built in the orbital shipyards surrounding Earth and Mars, dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed before. These vessels were equipped with shields capable of withstanding Drevak plasma bombardments, railguns that could puncture even the toughest Drevak hulls, and experimental cloaking technology that rendered them undetectable until they struck. The Leviathans were more than ships. They were symbols of humanity's defiance. When the first of these behemoths, Aegis Eternal, entered the battlefield, it was a turning point. Entire Drevak fleets, accustomed to dominating with sheer numbers, were decimated in coordinated assaults that combined overwhelming firepower with precise tactics. Human commanders, drawing on centuries of military history and strategy, exploited every weakness in the swarm's hive-mind coordination. But it wasn't just in space that humanity excelled. On the ground, the Drevak's biological superiority was challenged by humanity's creative genius. Powered exosuits, capable of turning ordinary soldiers into walking tanks, were deployed en masse. These suits were designed to adapt to any battlefield condition, from the frozen tundras of Europa to the scorched deserts of reclaimed colonies. Soldiers fought with the determination of those who had everything to lose, their courage bolstered by the knowledge that they were fighting not just for survival, but for the future of their children. As humanity's counteroffensive gained momentum, their tactics became increasingly bold. Entire fleets vanished from the front lines, only to reappear deep in Drevak-controlled space, striking at critical supply lines and hives. The swarm, once an unstoppable tide, began to fracture under the pressure. Their hive-mind communication, disrupted by human-engineered cyber attacks, became a liability. Ships turned on each other in confusion. Ground forces were left leaderless, and the once coordinated Drevak war machine began to crumble. For the first time in millennia, the Drevak felt fear. This young, chaotic species that they had dismissed as insignificant was not only fighting back but thriving under pressure. The swarm's leaders, scattered across distant hives, struggled to comprehend how humanity had turned the tide so completely. They had assumed that humans were weak because of their emotional nature, but they failed to see that this very trait and unyielding drive to protect their own was what made them unstoppable. As humanity's fleets pushed deeper into enemy territory, They began to uncover the true scale of the Drevak's conquests. Planets stripped bare, entire civilizations wiped out, and countless species enslaved or exterminated. These grim discoveries only strengthened humanity's resolve. The war was no longer just about survival, it was about justice. The Zenith Collective, still observing from the shadows, could no longer dismiss humanity. The species they had once deemed chaotic and insignificant was now a galactic force to be reckoned with. The Collective's calculations had been wrong, and they knew it. Humanity was not just surviving the crucible of war, they were reshaping it. With every victory, humanity grew stronger. Their armies swelled, their technology advanced, and their unity deepened. The Drevak Swarm, once the galaxy's most feared force, was being pushed back, their empire unraveling under the relentless assault of a species that refused to be extinguished. The galaxy watched in awe and terror as humanity unleashed its full potential, proving that even the smallest ember, when fueled by hope and desperation, could ignite a blaze that no one could extinguish. The war between humanity and the Drevak Swarm had drawn the attention of the galaxy. For the first time in ages, the Zenith Collective broke its long-held stance of quiet observation to scrutinize this unfolding conflict. Their countless centuries of data on humanity had led them to one inescapable conclusion. The species was unruly, emotional, and incapable of sustained progress. And yet, as they watched, their certainty was shattered. Across the galaxy, other civilizations also took note. Most had resigned themselves to a quiet existence under the looming shadow of the Drevak Swarm, knowing resistance was futile. The Swarm's path of destruction was simply a reality of the galaxy, a tide that no one could stem. But humanity was doing the impossible. They were not just resisting, they were winning. The Zenith Collective's hidden probes captured every detail. Human fleets, now sleek and bristling with hybridized technology, were cutting through the Drevak's forces with startling precision. The Leviathan Initiative warships, which had once seemed overambitious, proved devastatingly effective, serving as both battering rams and mobile fortresses. Smaller, faster vessels struck behind enemy lines, crippling Drevak supply routes and fragmenting their hive-like coordination. Human adaptability extended far beyond technology. Their strategies were fluid, evolving in response to every Drevak maneuver. Where the Swarm relied on overwhelming numbers and predictable tactics, humanity excelled in unpredictability. Their generals and strategists combined ancient military doctrines with new, creative approaches. No two battles were ever the same. This adaptability confused and frustrated the Drevak, whose hive-mind coordination struggled to counter such chaos. But what truly captivated the galaxy was humanity's unwavering resolve. The Drevak had underestimated what it meant to threaten the children of a species like humanity. It wasn't just an attack on individuals, it was an assault on their collective soul. With every child rescued from Drevak captivity, humanity grew fiercer. Their soldiers fought with a fury that no algorithm could predict, their determination fueled by a singular focus, ensuring a future for the next generation. Even in the darkest moments, when human fleets suffered setbacks or colonies were razed, humanity did not falter. Instead, they pushed harder, refusing to accept defeat. Their engineers created innovations on the fly, their leaders rallied fractured fleets, and their people united in ways the galaxy had never seen before. The Zenith Collective watched as humanity broke unspoken rules of war. When they reclaimed a key planet from the Drevak, they didn't merely rebuild, they transformed it into a staging ground for further offensives. Factories sprang up almost overnight, producing ships, weapons, and supplies at an industrial scale that defied logic. Every effort, every resource was directed toward the war effort. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. Humanity was all in. The Collective, with their millennia of experience, realized something profound. Humanity thrived under pressure. Their chaos, once seen as a weakness, was now their greatest strength. No species they had encountered had ever adapted so quickly, learned so rapidly, or fought so fiercely. It wasn't just survival that drove them, it was purpose. The galaxy began to shift. Some civilizations, emboldened by humanity's defiance, started resisting the Drevak in small ways, striking at vulnerable targets or disrupting supply lines. Others reached out to humanity in secret, offering information or resources. The Drevak, for the first time in their long and brutal history, found themselves isolated. The Zenith Collective's greatest revelation came from humanity's emotional core. They had always viewed emotions as a liability, something that made a species irrational and prone to failure. But now they saw the truth. Humanity's emotions were their greatest weapon. Their love for their children, their rage at injustice, their hope for a better future, these were forces that no amount of technology could quantify or predict. The Drevak Swarm, once a symbol of unstoppable conquest, was now on the defensive. Humanity's fleets pushed deeper into their territory, reclaiming planets and liberating species that had been enslaved for generations. Each victory sent shockwaves across the galaxy, inspiring those who had once believed resistance was impossible. The Zenith Collective, watching from their hidden vantage points, faced a choice they had not anticipated. Humanity was no longer the insignificant species they had dismissed for so long. They were a force that could reshape the galaxy itself. The collective began to wonder if their centuries of observation had blinded them to a greater truth. Perhaps humanity wasn't merely adapting to survive the war. Perhaps they were rising to claim their place among the stars. As humanity pressed forward, their message became clear to every corner of the galaxy. They were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for every species that had suffered under the Drevak's tyranny, for every child stolen, for every future erased. The swarm had awakened a force they couldn't comprehend. And now the galaxy was watching as humanity wrote its name in the stars with fire and defiance. The war reached its climax as humanity's fleets closed in on the heart of the Drevak Swarm. What had started as a desperate defense of Earth and its colonies had become a full-scale galactic offensive. The swarm, fractured and reeling, retreated to their core systems, a dense cluster of fortified worlds protected by biological armadas and massive hive mind structures. For the first time in their history, the Drevak were no longer the aggressors. They were cornered prey. Humanity's leaders knew this was the decisive moment. The Drevak Swarm could not be allowed to regroup or recover. If they escaped, they would return stronger, as they had done to countless civilizations before. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight to end the swarm's reign of terror forever. The final assault was meticulously planned. Humanity's warships, now bolstered by hybridized technology and strategic alliances with other species, formed an armada so vast that it eclipsed the stars. Each vessel bore scars from previous battles, symbols of the unyielding determination that had brought them to this point. At the heart of the fleet were the Leviathan Initiative ships, including the Aegis Eternal, leading the charge with overwhelming firepower and advanced defenses. The Drevak home system was a fortress unlike anything humanity had encountered. Organic structures, larger than moons, pulsated with life, each one a nerve center of the swarm's hive mind. Tens of thousands of Drevak warships formed a defensive perimeter, their bioluminescent hulls glowing ominously against the void. The system itself was a death trap, filled with minefields, gravitational anomalies, and organic weapon platforms that could tear apart entire fleets. Humanity's approach was calculated yet daring. Using their advanced cloaking technology, they sent smaller strike teams ahead to disrupt the swarm's hive mind communication. These teams targeted key relay nodes, sowing chaos among the Drevak forces. As the swarm struggled to reorganize, the full human armada surged forward, unleashing a coordinated assault that shattered the outer defenses. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Waves of Drevak ships crashed into humanity's lines, only to be repelled by a relentless barrage of hybridized weapons. Railguns, plasma cannons, and energy disruptors tore through the swarm's organic hulls, while human shields absorbed and redirected incoming fire. On the ground, elite strike teams infiltrated the hive worlds, planting explosives and disabling key structures from within. But the Drevak were not defeated easily. They unleashed their most horrifying weapons, living constructs the size of cities that devoured entire fleets. These monstrosities, fueled by the hive mind's desperation, pushed humanity to its limits. Ships were lost, soldiers fell, and the cost of victory climbed higher with every passing moment. And yet, humanity refused to falter. Every loss only steeled their resolve. They fought with the knowledge that this was their final chance to end the threat once and for all. For every fallen comrade, for every abducted child, and for every destroyed world, humanity pressed forward with unrelenting determination. The turning point came when the Aegis Eternal spearheaded an assault on the largest hive world, the central node of the Drevak hive mind. Scientists had theorized that destroying this node would sever the swarm's coordination entirely. The ship plunged into the heart of the enemy's defenses, absorbing fire from all sides as it launched a massive payload of kinetic and energy weapons. The explosion that followed was visible from across the system. The central hive world, once the pulsating brain of the swarm, was reduced to debris. The Drevak forces, cut off from their hive mind, descended into chaos. Ships turned on each other. Ground forces collapsed, and the once cohesive swarm fractured into isolated, mindless fragments. The victory came at a staggering cost. Many of humanity's finest ships were lost, and the survivors bore the scars of a brutal campaign. But they had achieved the impossible. The Drevak Swarm, the terror of the galaxy, was no more. As the smoke cleared, the galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. For the first time in millennia, the Drevak's shadow no longer loomed over the stars. Humanity, once dismissed as a chaotic and insignificant species, had risen to become the galaxy's defenders. But humanity's leaders understood that their victory was more than just a military triumph. It was a statement to the galaxy that even the most ruthless of enemies could be defeated when united by purpose and fueled by hope. The rescued children, who had been the heart of humanity's fight, became symbols of a brighter future. The Zenith Collective, observing from afar, came to a startling realization. Humanity was not merely another species struggling to survive in a hostile galaxy. They were something new, something that could not be contained by the calculations and predictions of advanced civilizations. The collective withdrew, unsure of what role they would play in the galaxy's new order. As humanity rebuilt, their story spread across the stars. They had not only defeated the Drevak, they had inspired others to stand against oppression. The galaxy was forever changed, and at its center stood humanity, a species that had fought for its future and earned its place among the stars. For the first time, the galaxy truly understood what humanity was capable of. And for the first time, humanity saw itself not just as survivors, but as pioneers of a new era.